So we're basically late at night, and this is a video pretty much on Stack Overflow and I guess the end of Stack Overflow in a way. I'm just going to zoom in here because I should be a good advocate for this firm, this company, this web page. Control plus. Let's just zoom in a little bit if I can. And here we see, there's the top of Python programming, top of the stack, and it's all about Stack Overflow. Yeah, by all means, go buy the book. Very interesting, a nice little read about all of programming. But basically, in particular, I actually did a little search as well on this, but we'll just go through and have a look. But if you just go there, this is something that I may have gone to quite a lot and answered questions on Stack Overflow, and it's humans interacting. So somebody asks a question and then somebody answers a question, and generally speaking, something like you go to the first question and see if anything pops up, and questions do pop up. But what I've discovered, or what's been the case, but this has been the case for a year or two now, but to an incrementing extent, is that the quality of the questions actually has diminished and diminished, and also the number of questions has diminished and diminished. And in fact, there we go, we just see only 2 questions, and it says over here, if I zoom in, there are no items for you to review. Matching the filter Python or Python 3x. I tend to answer questions in Python now, just because that's part of the stack that I use for coding. So Stack Overflow's basically died, and the reason why it's died is there are a whole bunch of models out there, large language models. Here's one, for example, which is Copilot. Here's another one, ChatGPT, where the user can just go in and ask any question that they want. And I was actually browsing this, so I did actually type in Stack Overflow, I guess, and then dead or something to that extent. And there was a couple of videos here. Stack Overflow is no longer useful. Somebody's got a gripe, everyone's got a gripe, but actually I thought I'd throw in a comment for the first time in a while. I never actually engaged this particular site. This is, I don't know, the meta site or something. But this guy says he has a reputation and so forth, and he's complaining about previous users. But actually, really, the comment is this, and some people have alluded to it, but it's correct to say that the site is dead, but actually for a different reason. The rise of AI and the large language models, that's what LLM stands for, which replicate the entire site's content in a single well-written request, has rendered Stack Overflow useless. The quality of the questions has significantly diminished as a result. Most answers, when the question is asked in a well-prompted way, are faster and more accurate, coming from a large language model, as well as, at times, less condescending. And basically, pretty much, in summary, maybe you could just say something like this. I can pull up any large language model. Let me Claude AI here. I'll do a quick login. Just continue with Google. It does all of the usual stuff. There we go. Sign in with my email, and I think we're good to go. There we go. A large language model loaded on my desktop. Here's another one. Corcel AI. Same thing. Loading up in beta. What would you like to discuss today? And then any of those I can do, like create a for loop in Python. Now, if I was a newbie, I might have gone and asked this on Stack Overflow, and then someone would have come along and insulted me. Well, that's one negative straight away. It had taken me like 30 minutes to get an answer from someone, and that answer would have been like some sort of insult because, you didn't research your work. And to an extent, that's actually true. Like, you should do a research of work. But anyway, I do this, and we can see what happens. It gives you the whole, here it is, it's created a list. If I zoom in again, we can see it creates a list for you, and then it says for fruit in fruits, print fruits. There we go, and that's how to iterate over a list. It gives you a little explanation as well. We define fruits to the containing of it, and then so forth, and it gives you the example of the output and some use cases and so forth. And some of them even say, "Can I help you anymore?" I hope this helps. Let me know if you have any other questions or need any further assistance. Now, a new user would never get this kind of thing from Stack Overflow. So what we're left with is, once you've got a good question, you're automatically going to be better off asking that question from a large language model. Even this particular question is not a good question, because you should have done your research anyway, and you'd have come to that answer. But if you've got a good question, like a quite complicated question that does need digging into, the language model, for the most part, when prompted reasonably well, does actually deal with it. And that leaves this, specific dilemma. And I guess, if I was to go back here, there's a couple of other videos. This guy talks about it, and a couple of other places as well. Maybe I'll go into them. But I think pretty much this is the summary of it, which is, and I think I can zoom in on this as well. I'm calling this, so I'm going to write a quick Google Doc on this, but basically I'm calling it Stack Underflow, which is the end of Stack Overflow. And the reason is this: basically beforehand you had a user base which was about 15 million developers, and the user base would ask questions into the Stack Overflow website, and then there would be other users that answer the questions. So you get this big repository. So here what you have is a large repository of questions and answers. For that, I guess humans are answering the questions. Well, they're actually asking and answering the questions, are asking and answering the questions. So this will result in a time lag, time delay between question and answer. So I guess that's the first part. But more importantly, sometimes if you do answer questions, you'll have arguments. So there's a second thing, which is humans, we tend to sometimes, not so frequently, but let's say 1 in every 10, 1 in every 100. So I don't know, maybe 1% of the time we could say, we won't even allocate the time, but there is a certain percentage of poor or poorly asked or answered questions. Now, prior to any large language model, this is what everyone had to use, and that was until about, 2022 or something like that, 21, 22, something. Well, when large language models started coming into play. So there's a little bit of friction. So, the result of this is a bit of friction between, and you needed to have a rule base, etc., in order to have a framework so that you didn't have badly asked questions. So there's a way of deleting badly asked questions, and you didn't have, I guess, badly answered questions, or in some cases like rudely answered questions. Well, one way or another, like you ask what you think is a decent question, and someone says, "Oh, you're an idiot." So rules had to come into play. Now, when the large language models came in, and we can sort of like see this after case here, what actually happens is the user now just goes straight to any of these GPTs. Here we go. There's one over there, ChatGPT. That was kind of like one of the first, I guess, or most popular at the time. There's Claude AI. There's Corcel. Here, I'll open up another one. There's Google Bard, which is now renamed as Gemini. And here is Copilot, since Microsoft's version, and they just incrementally getting better and better. So there's 5 that I have sitting on my desktop, but there's another 20 or 30, and in fact ChatGPT goes even a bit better. Actually, all of them do, or at least a few of them do now, where you can actually just prompt straight for, like, you don't even have to like say it's a Python question, just a for loop. let's just see what happens. I just typed in for loop here. A for loop in Python is a control flow statement, to iterate over a sequence, and it gives you an example. And we can see actually it's given like the standard same example and so forth. So you can and we can see how detailed it is as well and so forth. So but I could ask it something a bit more complicated. It will still do it so long as it's in the documentation or it's been answered on the stack somewhere. So what does that leave me as? All of the easy questions, well, I'm going to go straight to this large language model for. All of the slightly harder questions, I'm going to need, so for easy questions, straight away, I'm going to use the large language model, prefer the LLM, right? It's just faster. I didn't have to wait for anyone to answer it. I didn't even have to sift around any documentation. So long as I got like a reasonable background in it, I can actually like eyeball and check that the answer is correct. And I'll pretty much copy. So if I go back to here, I'll just copy the code straight out there, copy the code and paste that into my editor. So yeah, that's the typical thing. Didn't have to wait for anyone to answer it in any way. I could have asked something a little bit harder, something to do with the documentation. So easy questions, I'm going to prefer the large language model, and questions. For harder questions, I will put it even like this. Differences or preferences. Let's get the typo right. For the harder types of questions, I'm going to do something effectively like prompt engineering. So prompt engineering. Now, what does that actually mean? It means that like, I'll ask a question in a certain way that I'll ask it in a certain way where I have to ask several sub-questions. So basically, I'll ask, so let's just return there and then tab along. So ask several well-constructed sub-questions. And I've actually done this once before, but you can sort of like see. So let's say, for example, I want to make an app, a simple app that that says "Hello World," but it's like a graphical user interface app. So, which modules in Python can be used to make a GUI, graphical user interface? Name the top 3 modules. Right, I just start like that, something like this. So I'll zoom in a little bit, Control plus 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 plus. There we go. Send, and let's see work. Several modules, TK insert. So there we go, and I can kind of like stop it even there. Let me break this chain of thought right there. So it was about to give me the example, by the way, with TK inter. Create a brief example of an app that says hello world when a button is pressed, and hit the send button and just see what happens here. Here's a simple example of a GUI in TK. Now, getting this out of Stack Overflow would be quite a thing. I should go to the documentation, so I could go to the TK into documentation, but we can see that something's given to us straight here. And I could, again, literally just copy this code. I could go to my VS Code and I could attempt to paste it in here like this. There's a function here that says hello. It does the create, and it actually tells you what it's doing as well because it comments it nicely. Create a root window, create the label widget, create a button widget, and start the main loop. So let's just try and run this. So if I hit F5 to run it, it's running the code now, and I guess it's going to open up an application somewhere, and it does right over here. If I can move it across, let's have a look, see if I can move it. I've got to extend it a bit. Maybe I'll just drag it into the window there, and it's got the button, and if I click me, it says hello world. There we go, fantastic. So that's done all in like literally a prompt. There's explanations. I can ask for something even a little bit more complicated now. So for example, put this into a module, into functions. Put this into functions. Let's just see what happens there. I think maybe control return. No, it doesn't have to actually hit the up arrow on this thing. It's going to take this same code and hopefully it will create a main function, and if name equals, I've done double underscore main. Let's just see if it does that. Yeah, there we go, done it all. So I can get along, I can make quite a few mistakes. I can go and ask all the various different questions about it, and everything just I didn't need to interact with Stack Overflow at all. Now, the large language model, and this is the important piece, is here we've got, and I should really put it in there maybe, but in some way, I guess if there's a text box here, there's an interaction. There's an interaction between humans effectively. So there's some sort of learning process that's going on. Save and close. Right. Now, there's no interaction in the sense of learning anymore from Stack Overflow. So Stack Overflow, the website, cannot grow anymore. All that happens is the large language model takes the info out of Stack Overflow. It actually takes it out of Stack Overflow and a whole bunch of other places. So here really, it's not just that, it's other useful resources, ... And also, I guess we go to something like, apart from other useful resources, we'll put the documentation. So there's a few different places. I'm going to move them into, there we go, let's just move this up. There, save and close. So really, the large language model is taking from all of these. Let's just edit this tiny bit, if I can, in here. Don't know if we'll have a call outs. No, arrows, shapes, something like, no, it hasn't got the thing that I was looking for. Oh, there we go. Oh, it's got double braces. I just want a single brace. There we go. So something like all of these effectively. Control, there we go. And if I take that and attempt, didn't mean to take all of those, but if I take all of these and just drag them a little bit down, there we go. Basically, the LLM is taking Stack Overflow, some documentation, and other useful resources. Now, Stack Overflow, some people would write their answers into there or their versions of it and so forth. But one way or another, what happens is we've now got this, at least from the Stack Overflow perspective, it's just not growing anymore because nobody's interacting with it. It's dead. It's a dead resource. So what's actually happening is this resource, which was 15 million users, something like that, 15 million developers, they're just not interacting anymore. On some of the videos I've seen, it's gone down to like, I don't know, they say Stack says it's gone down to about 10, about a 30% drop, but other YouTube people will saying that it's down at, say, 7 million, like 50% drop. And I reckon it's even lower than that because, I can observe this. Like literally, this thing here is telling me, there's no questions left. No one's posting questions on there, and very few people are answering questions. So, and the questions that are posted here are, I'm not going to say this one's a poorly posted question, but for the most part, they're poorly posted questions, as in they don't contain enough information for what one might call a minimal reproducible example. So I think that's pretty much it. It's kind of like my comments or my take on it. I'm not sure there's too much else to add, apart from if I do, I guess, a couple of skips. Well, I only had to do one skip. There was one question asked. I know that it's late on a Sunday evening in the UK, but normally, there would have been 100 questions to go through, and it would have been 20 good ones and maybe 80 bad ones. Now there's a dozen questions at most to go through, and pretty much all of them are bad questions as well. So I guess it's the end of that website. You can do your own research on it. Maybe I'll click on a few things here. Stack Overflow is dead. Programming humor. Every question I would normally. Well, okay, this is not really well written in terms of language, but this again summarizes it. I guess every question I would normally search has been answered by OpenAI chat correctly with comments and without the snark. And that's kind of like what I would snark, when I was sort of like people being facetious or being rude back to you. So here you go. I don't get this like rude answer. I get like, here's the answer, and can I help you even anymore? And I find that hilarious. Initially, I read that to mean that someone coded an OpenAI bot and started. Okay, fine, 100% correct so far. But when I told it I would rather use it than Stack Overflow from now on, it started spitting out something that looked like legal but covering, saying it wasn't an expert and so forth. Some people are against the large language models, possibly, but they're going to come round because it's just ultimately way, way, way more convenient. Maybe the bot pulling answers from Stack Overflow is panicking because it realizes that if Stack Overflow goes away, it won't be able to answer some questions for you. Well, that's not true. It's definitely going to be able to answer questions because it's taken the entire repository. I think that one other piece is that one of the purposes of Stack Overflow was, if I move on to there, just delete these bits, is that users, including myself, gained reputation for answering questions well. And gained their reputation. What actually happens is you get the score. So you get a score that looks like this 5,000 at the top here. If I can maybe, there we go, I'll zoom in a little bit. That's a little score. So you get this score over there, and that's sort of like your reputation points and how you rank. Well, I've dropped down a lot now because I've stopped using it, I guess, but kind of like how you rank in the community. So the users do gain these reputation points for answering a question well, or for answering questions well, or asking well-formed questions. Well-formed questions. But that's no longer the case because we're going straight to this LLM. So there's no incentive or less incentive to ask or answer questions, which is a double-edged sword of death, basically, because the fewer people that ask, the fewer people that answer, the reputation points don't count as much, or it has less of a meaning, and there's less reason to go there in the first place as both of those result in each other going round and round in a circular argument. So it's kind of like dead, sort of like for that reason. But the worrying piece about it maybe is that, and this is really the concern or the result of this, the above is that knowledge in this particular capacity, and maybe some people will already see where this is heading, has started or is tapering off. So there's no knowledge growth, which results in zero knowledge growth. The community's effectively died. It's kind of like killed itself off. Over here, it's been isolated. There's an isolation point right there. You do get people that are writing documentation, you do get the other useful resources, but this community effect is just diminishing. And unless the large language models can step up one more gear. So at the moment, a large language model doesn't create new stuff at this point in time. So, and this is the important bit to note, a large language model, which is the LLM, does not create new stuff. It does to a certain extent, so it's not 100% true. It is in a sense that, like, sometimes I can ask it a question and it will answer the question in a very innovative way, but based on the documentation that it's been given. But what it won't do is it won't come up with a new unique idea. That's kind of like still almost the exclusively still the human domain, at least in the near term. Maybe in longer term, the language models will be, I guess, more adaptive and kind of like it'll be like generative AI, as in they'll be able to think in a unique way, possibly at some point in time. But at this point in time, the large language model really is it's the equivalent of, or it'd be rude to say that it's like effectively like predicting text, but that effectively is by and large what the large language models do. They are predicting the next word or the next few words. So that's basically what these models do. So we've got to the point where we're in this stagnating pool of, you get these answers very quickly, you get them in a very polite way, it's all very efficient, but that's the positive of it. So the positive is that it's fast, efficient, it's fast, it's efficient. By the way, like when I do these like typos and we see the self-correcting and so forth, like we just take this for granted, but like I guess 25 years ago that didn't exist either. So like we just grow used to these things. But the positives are fast, efficient, polite. We'll throw that in there. You don't need to be wound up when you ask a question, so polite is another thing. And fast, efficient, polite. Yeah, we could kind of like leave it at that. Well, we could say it is innovative in a certain way. So it's innovative in the sense that we'll answer your question in a way that would actually quite surprise you in terms of it. In terms of like you might not have thought of the answer in a specific way. But the negatives are, at least in the near term, so in the near term, the knowledge base does not increase. And I guess that's a really, really big negative in the sense that, you know, maybe I could think of other negatives, but it's probably like the only, like, or at least a major one, which is the knowledge base doesn't increase. So we're now at a point where we've stopped advancing for a little period. So that's not necessarily a positive. Like, we thought we were going to advance faster. Here we go. Fast, efficient. So we get these gains, but on the other side, we're going to lack this innovation. Hopefully, or at least this innovation, I guess it won't come from this Overflow website community anymore, 15 million developers. Maybe it's a case that these 15 million developers or kind of just provide documentation and other useful resources. And that actually might be the case. And the reason why it might be the case is that Stack Overflow is a repository of user answers. So it's taken from the people. And this isn't the first complaint about LLMs, by the way. This has happened in like many different facets, with, I don't know, writing music and writing films and stories and other things. Basically, it's taken from the people and does not credit the people who it has taken from. And I guess that's the big kind of like negative there, is some people will be up in arms about this because the answers effectively, although you could say that everyone's answer, like if I answer a question, it's based on knowledge that I've gained from someone else. So like I've stolen someone else's knowledge. But I suppose it's a case that Stack Overflow's done it and stolen 15 million developers' answers, and kind of like, or at least not Stack Overflow. Well, actually Stack Overflow, because it's combined with ChatGPT, so it's Stack plus Chat GPT, which has taken 50 million developers' answers. So it's taken, effectively, this is what it's done, is effectively, I guess, developers' answers and kept the benefits for itself. Now, what does that mean, like kept the benefits? Kept the benefits for itself, took 50 million. Because it doesn't, like, I never paid to ask a question, so how has it kept the benefits? So there you go. For loop in JavaScript. There you go, just to throw out. Sends me to W3 schools there. But actually, there we go, JavaScript loops. I don't have to go. There is some websites and so forth that it sends you to, so that's quite nice. But down below, it gives me the whole thing. And if somebody did, well, this was someone's answer, presumably. Maybe it came out of the documentation. I don't know. But this was someone's answer, and that person never got any credit for the answer, basically. W3 Schools was cited. The developer at Mozilla.org was presumably cited. And that's it. Let's have a look. Yeah, there we go. So there is stuff there now. But if that answer was answered by an individual somewhere, that person never got credited for it, and i.e. if that was asked on Stack Overflow, that person never got credited for it. So that's kind of like where it resides, really, which is that I guess you get a whole bunch of angry people who feel that they've been stolen from, which is true to a degree. Anyway, nonetheless, it's the end pretty much of Stack Overflow. I think there is something called Stack AI or something like that, or that's probably the place to be. So where is the future? So for sure, Stack Overflow was a past. Maybe some of the future is here. I don't even know if this is true or not. So let's have a look. Maybe stick this into it. AI features to supercharge your workflows, talk to an expert. I don't know. It doesn't sound like it's... Maybe it will be good at some point. Stack Overflow for Visual Studio Code. Yeah, there's a whole ton of them. I didn't need to get Stack Overflow in there in particular. Enhanced search. Summarizes multiple answers. Maybe that's useful to some degree. Like summarizing the search will get you there a bit quicker, but the GPT does that anyway. Auto answer app, automate access to essential team knowledge in Slack or Microsoft Teams. Again, I don't know. I've attempted to use some of. There are some repos and stuff at work that do those types of things, but none that I've seen that are you know I think still none that I've seen that are as good as any of these large language models. And the thing about these large language models, and I did create one at one of the places I work at, is even if you had, the access to the internet, you didn't want to use a large language model that like points to the internet. You can actually use a local language model, so an LLM, which is um, it's also an LLM, local language model, which basically is everything on your local PC or drive. Right, so you can point it to a certain places, files, folders, and stuff, and it will answer in the context of like your own company or your own knowledge base. So it really seems that the future, I don't know, lies in a hybrid somewhere between these things. It certainly lies with. Let's put this on here as well. But it most certainly lies with the large language models. So the general large language chat, GPT is the most popular, and all of the rest of it. So maybe I could put in, I guess here Bing, Gemini. I can't remember what the Bing one is actually called. I think it's changed the name to a couple of times. Corcel and Anthropic's over there. Claude AI. So that's kind of like where the local future is, somewhere around these local language models. Then you've got large, these large language models. You've also got, I'd actually call them that. So you've got large language models, and you've possibly got the local language model is, I will say this, it's lower, right? And this is something like, by the way, Llama. I'm sure it's called Llama with two L's. So Llama, something like that. There we go. We'll find loads of different things here. Meta's Llama is what it is. Don't know why. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so Meta Llama 3.1. The open source AI model you can fine tune, distill, and deploy anywhere. Our latest instruction tune model is available in 8 bytes, 70 bytes. So this thing gets actually quite big on a PC. So like a PC that I'm running right now, it'd be quite big on it. I have done it and used it, but you can just download these and wrap it into like a Streamlit app on Python. That's exactly what I actually did. So it looks like a little web page, and you can ask your question. But actually, when you ask the question in these large language models, like I know that they kind of like steal your data or keep your data or however you want to call it, but these things are actually quite fast. It responded literally. This is actually using one of them, by the way, and it says ready to chat here. But this thing answered in like seconds. Again, like do the same in C++. There we go. It's answering literally in seconds, whereas the local language models actually take probably about 3 minutes, and the quality of the answer actually isn't as good as these large ones, and that's because it's exporting things up to the cloud and then back down again from the cloud. So then you've got this super fast supercomputer in the cloud basically, and the transmission of data and the processing and the retransmission of data back is faster than processing locally on the PC. So just because you're using a much more powerful model. So that's pretty much it. I think that's going to be my summary or my ending part of it. If anyone's got any comments, it'd be interesting to hear what you've got to say about the any of the large language models, chat GPTs and so forth, and where you think we're going. It'll be good to hear. If you felt this useful, thumbs up, like, follow, and all the rest of it. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm going to sign off and have a good night.